Hello and welcome to this edition of Side Retired, the MLB podcast. It is Dylan, joined alongside James and Jack. We are back for another top 10 edition. Today we're breaking down the top 10 shortstops in baseball. This is a very top-heavy position. You'll have names like Carlos Correa, Francisco Lindor, Corey Seager, Trey Turner, and a bunch of other guys making appearances today. Before we get into it, James, Jack, how you guys doing?
Good.
Doing great.
And then, of course, you can find this episode on Apple Podcast, at our YouTube page, Side Retired Pod, on the Twitter, at Side Retired Pod. And then the website is also sideretiredpod.com. You can check out great content there, lots of articles, lots of stuff like that. You can also find our interview from last week with Ken Davidoff of the New York Post. It was a great time talking Mets, Yankees, as well as breaking down the Hall of Fame ballot, which announcement is coming out pretty soon by the time you're listening to this episode. So we can get into this episode. Same format as always. James will give his top 10. Jack will give his top 10. I'll give mine, and then we'll break down sort of individual player-by-player basis. So James, start us off.
Yeah, so at number 10, I got Tim Anderson. Number 9, I got Trevor Story. Number 8, I got Xander Bogaerts. 7, Francisco Lindor. 6, Brandon Crawford. 5, Corey Seager. 4, Bichette. 3, Carlos Correa. 2, Fernando Tatis. And at number 1, Trey Turner.
I got number 10, Brandon Crawford, 9, Xander Bogaerts, 8, Bichette, 7, Trevor Story, 6, Francisco Lindor, 5, Corey Seager, 4, Wander Franco, 3, Trey Turner, 2, Fernando Tatis, and number 1, Carlos Correa.
And I've got Bichette at 10, Javier Baez at 9, Trevor Story 8, Wander Franco 7, Bogaerts 6, Tatis 5, Corey Seager 4, Francisco Lindor 3, Trey Turner 2, and Carlos Correa at number 1. I guess we can start with Jack's favorite player. By now you've gotten used to it. That's Carlos Correa. Maybe he's a Yankee by the time this episode comes out. Probably we're still in the lockdown if he's a free agent. But Jack, give us your take on why the number 1 shortstop in baseball, who I agree with, is Carlos Correa.
Well, first off, I'll say that when it comes to defensively, shortstop, I think offensively, Carlos, I think he stands kind of closer with some of these other guys, but defensively, he pretty much blows everyone else out of the water. He was in the 98th percentile for baseball savants, outs above average, ranked first in defensive runs saved. Then also Mark Simon he did a study basically evaluating like plays with diving, sliding and jumping, and basically Carlos blows his success rate is the highest. He completes those plays 62% of the time versus the next closest was Trevor Story at 42. So he pretty much just blows everyone out of the way defensively. Then obviously the one issue with him is being able to stay healthy, but when he's mashed offensively. This past year he had a great year. The one bump for him was that his July he had a slump. But overall, for the year, his first half, he had a 147 WRC plus versus the second half with a 120. His OPS for the entire year is outstanding, 895 for the first half, 794 for the second half. I mean, obviously, he mashed the entire year. He had a 5.8 WAR. I think he takes away this top spot over pretty much everyone else for his both is a clear defensive number 1, and obviously offensively, he's pretty easy, excellent player. I think a top 10 player in the major leagues. Really nothing else to say for Carlos. I think every single team in the entire major leagues could use his services. Obviously, I don't think you're not going to have everyone bid on him, but definitely the top remaining free agent.
James, is this a situation similar to our last episode where we did the top 10 second baseman, where you introduced us to AA metrics, anti-Altuve metrics, where you are pretty anti-Astros and thus Correa falls down to 3 on your list? Or do you genuinely think Trey Turner, Fernando Tatis, overall just better players than him? You're muted again.
I genuinely do think Trey Turner is a better player, and Fernando Tatis are better players than Carlos Correa. I mean, Trey Turner is just a machine at the plate. This past season, he led the National League in batting average and in hits and in stolen bases. I mean, this guy's an absolute monster. He hit 328 last year with a 146 OPS plus, 28 homers, 32 stolen bags. And I mean, look at his numbers. I mean, he's like he's a career 300 hitter. He steals at least 30 bags a season whenever he's healthy. Even some years going over 40. And he walks well. I mean, he doesn't walk horribly. He walks 41 times, 110 strikeouts last year. His OPS was 911. And I mean, he had a great season last year. And I think his track record shows that he could maintain this pace that he had last year. And so that's why I have him at my number one spot. He gets it done at the plate, and he's a solid defender who can cover a lot of ground.
And he also has the Whit Merrifield effect in that he has been in very solid lineups with the Nationals. Obviously, he had Juan Soto hitting right behind him, which definitely helps you as a player. With the Dodgers, that's arguably still the best lineup in baseball. Trey Turner sitting atop that lineup is going to get pitched to. He's going to see his pitches, and he's going to do really well. He's also, as James mentioned, a good, multi-talented, potentially, I guess you wouldn't call him a five-tool player because he's not known for his defense or arm, but going to steal 30 bases, going to hit 30 homers a year. That is a very solid player at shortstop. Jack, you had him at 3. Pretty similar thoughts to us, I assume.
Yeah, I think the one thing I give Carlos Correa an edge over him, which is I don't think James considered as much, as obviously he's the defensive, like he's the golden boy platinum glove winner, which I think gives him a slight edge. Obviously, Trey Turner and Carlos, I think for their span of their careers, they've both been excellent offensive players. Maybe Turner gets a slight edge, but overall with shortstop, with the defensive gap being wide as it is, I give Carlos. I think the top 3 as it is very close. I think me and James had the exact same top 3 players. I think you could pretty much, I would say Correa for me at least is the clear number 1, but I do see how the gaps are definitely close between Tatis, Trey Turner, and Carlos.
And I guess we'll talk about that third player you just mentioned, Fernando Tatis Jr. Not that I'm a hater of him, but I had him at 5 just because that whole shoulder situation is a little bit scary to me. He opted not to have surgery this offseason unless he's playing with fire and potentially injuring it even harder. I know James went through a recent shoulder surgery as well, so I don't know if you have anything to mention in that area, potentially playing shortstop at the big league level with that. Even tried moving him out to right field for a bit, which obviously did not work. And Tatis is not known for his defense at all, but he rates, pretty much plain and simple. You guys both have had him at number 2. I had him at number 5, so not a huge hater, but in general, talked me into Tatis being the number 2 second baseman in baseball.
Shortstop.
Shortstop.
Yeah, I mean, 42 home runs. Yeah. No, but he has a 975 OPS, a 166 OPS plus this past season. I mean, that is unreal, especially to hear from the shortstop position. He could run too. I mean, obviously 25 stolen bases in 130 games. He probably would have eclipsed the 30 mark if he'd played a full season. But yeah, I mean, look at that. He had 135 hits and 73 of them were extra base hits. I mean, that's over as half of his hits were extra base hits. That's ridiculous. And he still hits for average. I mean, a 282 average with the 364 OBP. He gets on base. Yes, the strikeouts are definitely a major problem. He struck out 153 times, but he still did walk a good 62 times. So yeah, I mean, I just think the bat makes up for all the woes on defense, and so yeah, that's why I have him at number 2 on my list.
Yeah, just reiterating what James said, I think Tatis is by far, out of all the players you're going to hear this episode, is by far the best offensive player. And to do that when he just turned 23 years old, he had, put up 156 weighted runs created plus 6-1 WAR. I think he's obviously he's an elite offensive player in the entire leagues, and to be doing it at his age is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, I think if he could stay healthy, he's definitely a potential 40-40 guy we could see in the coming seasons.
Well, I guess if we're going to mention age, we're going to talk about a guy that isn't even 21 years old yet. That is, of course, the Rays starting shortstop who they recently extended to a long-term deal. That is, of course, Wander Franco. I had him towards the middle of the pack at 7. Jack had him at high as 4. And James, you left him off your list. We'll start with you. You're the only one there. What's with Wander Franco?
I mean, yeah, I'm not going to deny he had a monster season last year. I mean, he was a great player. If you could scroll down for me, Dylan, a little bit to the numbers. I mean, yeah, don't get me wrong. He had a great season. Although he only he's played 70 games in the major leagues, dude. Like, I can't put a guy on my list in the top 10 as to other guys that have played Tatis, 3, 4, 5, 6 seasons in the MLB. So I just, don't get me wrong. He's great. He's definitely like 11, 12, 13, but he's not top 10 just yet. I need one more year of work from him before I could officially put him into my top 10.
And at most positions, you can probably fit him in. It's just shortstop is a position where there's 8 to 9 guys that are for sure top players in baseball.
If I could put him at second base, he'd easily have cracked my top 10 list.
All right, Jack, give us why he's your number 4 then.
So I dove into a bit of his splits. So obviously, I think Franco got called up in what, June or July. So he played a lot heavier in the second half. And so his second half weighted runs created plus was 143, which obviously I think that's about like he played 60 games in the second half. It's obviously so a small sample size, but he clearly raked. And obviously versus the first half, he struggled when he made his original debut. And then obviously Franco is a switch hitter. And like guys I've mentioned in the past, like Ozzy Albies or Ketel Marte, Franco is a much better hitter right-handed versus left with a 181 WRC plus for the year versus left-handed pitching. So when he's hitting right-handed with a 429 weighted on base percentage. So he's clearly a dude who can rake. And obviously, like I didn't really evaluate him the same way James did, saying like, oh, he's only played 70 games. I base this list off a projection for next year and like just seeing his raw hit potential, seeing how he gets on base, 463 slugging, 347 on base. You know, he broke like he on numbers compared to like Mickey Mantle with his on base streak. I just see that as like an offensive player. And on top of that, he can clearly run, he can field. He's going to be an elite shortstop. I think he's going to be a guy who in 5 years you're talking about as a potential like #1 player in the entire league. So that's why I valued him at number 4. Obviously, I think that's going to get a lot of criticism just because he is a rookie, but I just see this as we just got a small sample size to what Ron DeFranco is going to do for years to come. He's only 20 years old, and I think he can clearly he's going to be a force to be reckoned with in the league.
And then I guess speaking of shortstops who got paid, Corey Seager got his big 10-year, $325 million extension, or not extension, but deal with the Texas Rangers. Any worries about him leaving comforts of Dodger Stadium and starting a new somewhere else? Or considering we also had him pretty high on our top 10 list, I believe I had him 4, Jack had him 5, James also had him 5, just an overall solid player.
I think the overall consensus, I mean, you guys can tell me if you disagree, is obviously he's someone who can crush baseballs. You know, he had a great offensive season last year. It's just the defense is definitely a glaring issue, and that it's pretty apparent throughout everyone in the league that he's going to have to move off to third later in that contract with the Rangers. But I mean, that being said, he still had like, you know, near 400 on base percentage, over 500 slugging, 147 WRC plus. So he crushes baseballs. He's still going to a lineup that has Marcus Semien, and then he's also joining some of the new Rangers who raked last year. I'm not really worried that that's going to affect his offensive production. The only thing that I think holding him back is his defense, and I think possibly either next year or the year after that, you're going to see him make the permanent switch to third base.
Yeah, I think another big problem with Seager is he really needs to just stay healthy. Hopefully he can stop having the injury bug get him. I'd love to see him play 157 games, 140 games like he did his in 2016, 2017, get back to that form. So yeah, I think if Seager can stay healthy, I think we could see another monster offensive season from him.
All right, now time to get to one of the guys that we're gonna have an argument about. Maybe there's some Met Yankee bias, Francisco Lindor, who last year was going to be one of those consensus top echelon players with Carlos Correa, with Trey Turner, with Corey Seager. I'm not ready to move him off after one bad season. And this is like the Jeff McNeil argument we had last episode, but on steroids, because Francisco Lindor is 10 out of 10 times a better player than Jeff McNeil. In the second half of the season, he wasn't all that bad. Obviously, his first half was abysmal. Jack, I don't know if you can pull this page of Francisco Lindor, but in general, in the second half of the season, I'm pretty sure his numbers ticked up once he came back from his injury. First half, ugly. Defense is obviously still an amazing part of Francisco Lindor's game. He's a 2-time Gold Glove Award winner. And I still think he's definitely one of those top shortstops in baseball. There's a reason the Mets threw $330 million at him. It's not a one-year type of thing that all of a sudden we're going to worry, oh, he can't play in New York, he should go back to a small market team. He's here in New York to stay. He's going to be a top 10 shortstop. I have him at number 3. Jack has him at number 6. James has him as number 7. Jack, I don't know if you've gotten those numbers up by now.
Yeah. So I was just going to say, like, before, like, I know you compare this to the Jeff McNeil argument we had a couple episodes ago, but like this is nowhere near that. Like Francisco Lindor, even off his defense alone, and then he's still an above average hitter in the major leagues. He is without a doubt like a top 7 shortstop in the MLB in my mind. You could make arguments to have him higher. The one thing I'll disagree with you on is obviously you did mention his second half. He did have a better second half than his first half. He was 97 weighted runs created plus in the first half, second half, WRC plus of 118. So that's definitely, 20-point increase on, so that's, 20 percentiles higher in the major leagues is definitely a very massive uptick. So you could cite that to joining the Mets. But also, I'm just looking at his numbers. Like, obviously, I think the Mets paid him to be the hitter he was in 2018, where he was an MVP candidate over 7 WAR, 132 WRC plus. He had 38 home runs. He had an average of 277, on base 352. So he clearly raked that year, and he just hasn't been the same hitter since. He's gone, obviously, 2020 shortened, but 2020 and 2021 combined, he's been slightly above league average as a hitter. He had the uptick in the second half this past season, so I do expect he will find maybe not exactly 2018 pace, but he should definitely improve from the overall numbers Mets fans were complaining about in like April or May. But I'm just not ready to like put him on the same leaderboard as like Trey Turner, Corey Seager, Carlos Correa. I don't think he's at that echelon. I mean, he could possibly return to that because I think we did see him break, and I think he did give me PTSD in that Francisco Lindor September game. But like, I just don't see how you could have him. Obviously his defense alone does put him higher on this list than it would be if you're just evaluating him for his offense. But I still see him on the outside looking in of like that top 5 where you're having like these elite offensive players.
I mean, we also have said the whole injury situation with Corey Seager with Fernando Tatis. If you look at it before 2021, and I guess that's the most recent season, so there is a little cause for concern, but he's always remained healthy, 60 games in 2020, always over 140 games the rest of his career, except for his rookie year when he came up mid-season. Lindor's usually going to play, and who knows, maybe this is the Mets curse, and now he's always going to get injured because that's what happened when stars come to the Mets. But I don't think it's fair to judge Lindor based on previous Mets failures. I would assume maybe I'm a little high with him at number 3, but I just figured a little bit better than Corey Seager defensively, and maybe Corey Seager's a little bit better offensively than Lindor, but the overall package player of Lindor I took a tiny bit better than Seager. James, I don't know if you have anything else to add on the whole Francisco Lindor situation.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's, it's just a tough debate because to see a shortstop, I mean, drop off so dramatically after like 2 years after, hitting 32 homers and having a 284 batting average is just so surprising. So I really didn't know what to do with him. So I moved him down in my list because it's just you have to look at the last 2 seasons and how the numbers haven't been there. So I couldn't disrespect the other guys I had in front of him that have been putting up good seasons for the last couple of years. So I had to move Lindor down on my list.
What about Lindor's teammate? And that was the former teammate, and I was the only one that put him on my list. Javier Baez, I snuck in at number 9. Was there any serious consideration for him cracking your top 10, or do you just figure a lot of hype, a lot of sparkle? He's a great highlight reel player, but is he really an overall great player? Jack, we'll start with you.
I mean, I don't know. Like, obviously the Tigers, they just gave him the payday. There's lots of great players on this list. I think Javi obviously had he had a pretty good year last year. I think a better tenure with the Mets than people give him credit for. 117 OPS plus, OPS over 800. So definitely an overall solid year. I just think that there's 10 shortstops on this list better than him. I definitely think, like, I don't know where do you have him on your list? Like bottom out?
Yeah,
you
have
have
him
at
at 9 deciding.
So I definitely, if you want to make an argument for him to be like 9 through 12, I could definitely see that but I just don't think, at least for my list, I did not have him crack the top 10 because of like, I think there's just other guys who had better seasons than him last year. I think he definitely can be. I could see him, depending on how good of a year he has, if he finds more of the MVP Javi form, he can maybe get like up to 7 or 6, but I don't think there's enough to justify that right now.
Yeah, until Javier Baez learns to take a walk, he will never be on my top 10 list. I'm sorry, you can't strike out 184 times and walk 28 times. It just, no. Dude, it's just crazy to me because he's never had an OPS over 900, even though his slugging percentage some years is like as high as like 560. So that's just like absurd to me. And he needs to learn how to walk and just take pitches, dude. Like that at bat this year, when he swung at that pitch that went like 48 feet. That literally sums up watching Javier Baez play baseball. So yeah, whenever he walks more than, he's only walked over 30 times once in his career. So whenever he walks over 40 times, I'll put him in my top 10 list.
I will say you did mention the walk rate. I just used the argument about Lindor having a good second half. Javier Baez did almost have as many walks as he did with the Mets as he did the Cubs in half the games. He had around 300. If you look at his Met numbers alone, it sort of resembles what Yoenis Cespedes did in 2015 when he came over. 141 OPS plus, hit a lot of 9 homers in 50 games. So that's puts him on trajectory for what, like 30-ish in a season, which is about what he does in his career. So in general, is Baez the best shortstop in baseball? No. You're going to see Carlos Correa is going to get paid double what Baez got, and deservedly so. But I found room for Baez in my top 10. He's also great defensively. Will you get the occasional, like, what on earth is he doing type of things? Absolutely. Will you get the whole thumbs down incident? Yes, you will. But at the same time, will you get the flashy plays? Will you get the funny tags? Will you get the thing he did against the Pittsburgh Pirates? I'm still sure Will Craig, the Pirates' first baseman during that play, still has no clue what happened. So Javier Baez being a top 10 shortstop in baseball seems deservedly so, in my opinion. One guy I believe we all had on our list, and correct me if I'm wrong, Xander Bogaerts of the Boston Red Sox. James, you're a big Bogaerts guy, so go ahead and talk to us about your pick. You're muted again.
Muted.
I think Bogaerts is just a monster at the plate. I mean, he's still he's been one of the best shortstops offensively the past couple of seasons. If I could get a little scroll, please, Mr. Campion, to his career numbers.
The screen has frozen on there.
All right, here we go.
Oh. Tech difficulties. All right, just go off of what you remember with him.
It's well, I'll do it because I come prepared. Bogaerts obviously has been an elite offensive shortstop since 2019, 141 weighted runs created plus versus 130 in 2020 and 21 respectively. I mean, the story of last season was monster first half, like one of the best players in baseball. And then the second half, he really seemed to dwindle offensively. And then another minus is that he's one of the worst shortstops defensively, -5 defensive runs saved last year. So clearly pretty bad defensively, and then a subpar offensive second half made me take some consideration, move him down on my list. And so, but obviously he is offensively, he's a great talent. I think he does have an opt-out after this year, if I'm not mistaken. So that's clearly going to be a story to watch to see if he has a good enough year to opt out of that to try to get more of a payday, because he is on a very team-friendly deal from the Red Sox. So he could, he's definitely a guy to watch if your team misses out on one of Carlos Correa or Trevor Story. He could be a guy who, he probably, since it seems like almost every single shortstop got paid this offseason, he might be the guy next offseason at the position. But really nothing else to be said than just like monster offensively for the most part, and then pretty bad defensively.
Yeah, I mean, he's gotten MVP votes the last 4 years. I feel like that says a lot about how good of a hitter he's been. He's been a 300 hitter basically over the last 4 seasons. And I mean, yeah, look at the OPS plus. He's been, around 130 every single year. So yeah, I love the way that he hits, and I just think he's a beast at the plate, and that's why I have him so high on my list.
3-time All-Star, 4-time Silver Slugger. He's definitely going to get paid next offseason. As Jack said, he's probably the number one guy available on the shortstop market when he opts out, because his contract is pretty cheap with the Red Sox. So it seems like a pretty good guarantee that Xander Bogaerts will be opting out of his Red Sox deal. Another guy that you guys both had on your list, I really wanted to include him, but I just couldn't fit him. He'd probably be my number 11 or number 12. That's Brandon Crawford, who last year, if you are still listening to us from all the way back then, David Halpert, the mystery man who now writes for our website, made the bold prediction Crawford is going to be a top 10 shortstop once again. We can share that audio again at some point on the Twitter or something like that. We laughed at him and said Brandon Crawford hasn't been good in years. And you can say that he's always been good defensively. He used to be great. He's probably lost a little bit of his range. He is a 4-time Gold Glove Award winner. He won it this year again, of course, because this was his bounce back resurgent season, because he hit 300, an OPS plus of 141. He started in the All-Star game. Brandon Crawford really turned back the clock to those vintage days, and obviously you both rewarded him with a top 10 spot.
Yeah, I mean, you say like he turned back the clock, but like I would even say like in a way, I think he had by far his best offensive season last year. 139 WRC plus, over 5 WAR, and like you mentioned, all of his accolades he had, and then obviously being a premier defensive shortstop in the National League. So really lots of that. Obviously, he doesn't have some of the track record, and I don't think the projections like him to sustain this success in the future. So which is why I gave him he's just on the outside. He got my 10 spot, but I do think obviously he should be rewarded for that monster year, and credit to David for predicting it. But I think, if the Giants rather, sorry, they did lose Posey, so we'll see if guys like him and Brandon Belt do have that newfound success they had in 2021 next year. But I think, Crawford, I do count on him staying in that top 10 range for shortstop.
Yeah, I agree with everything Step just said. And I think that, looking at 2020 and then looking into 2021, he reinvented himself offensively. So I'm very high on him. And I think we could see another, maybe not as big of a season, but definitely another better offensive season than Crawford, opposed to his earlier days in San Francisco.
I think with me leaving him at 11 and 12 is just because there's so many, as we've said, good shortstops that I just figured show it to me one more year just to prove it's not a fluke. Same with the whole San Francisco Giants. I'm assuming everyone's going to have the Dodgers winning the West again, even though the Giants won it last year. Just as sort of we know the Dodgers are going to be consistent. They're going to win 100 games like they always do. Giants might very well do the same again this year, but we just need to make sure Brandon Belt, Brandon Crawford, Evan Longoria, Mike Yastrzemski, and that group of guys is legit and is having like 2010, 2014 done all over again, which I'm not 100% sold on just yet, but who knows? It might happen. Unless you guys have anything else to add on Crawford.
Nope.
Another guy we all had towards the bottom of our list / off our list. Did anyone have him off our list? James off. Or no, James. Well, you had him at number 4. All right. You're a Bichette guy. That's it. Give us number 4.
Yeah, I love Bichette. I mean, he's a great hitter. I mean, look at his stats. I mean, obviously this was his first full season in Toronto. But yeah, I mean, 828 OPS, 123 OPS plus. I mean, you can look his rookie year in 2019, and obviously the COVID shortened season of 2020. He hit very well. He's always been a great hitter. We knew that coming when he was called up. But yeah, I was very impressed. He's a young guy, and he's got about 200 games under his belt. But I mean, so far he's a lifetime. I mean, he's a 301 hitter, 345 OBP, 850 OPS with a total OPS plus of 128 through his career. I'd like to see him walk a little bit more and obviously not strike out as much. But I think he's he's a solid defender, and he's really good at the plate. So that's why I had him at number 4 on my list. I think there's a lot of potential for him to continue to grow as a player, and I think we could definitely see a little bit more power this year, especially because he's only 20. He's only 23 years old. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's only 23 years old. So I think we could definitely see some more power come in as he gets older.
Yeah, I think James pretty much hammered the good points. I had Bichette as well, but good bit lower on my list. He's definitely a great offensive bat, 122 weighted WRC plus this past year, 120 in 2020. And then he had nearly a 5 WAR for the entire season this year. So definitely a great overall player, and definitely a plus defender as well. I just think that, the offensive numbers are, while good, aren't as good as some of the other guys on this list, which just kept him like on the bottom tier part of my top 10.
Couple of guys that just missed out on our top 10 that we do feel like deserve shout outs. Tim Anderson. James fit him in at his number 10 spot. So James, will let you take it away with Tim Anderson, but pretty much that 10 to 12 range that we talked about with Javier Baez, solid player, flip of the coin. We're waiting for this baseball reference page to load because we know James did not do his research, but
I did do my research. It's much easier to just look off the shared screen so I can see everyone else. I mean, Tim Anderson, he just rakes. I mean, he was the batting champ in 2019. He's hit over 309 the last 3 seasons with a 335, a 322, and a 309. His OPS has been over 800 these past couple of seasons. He's sneaky on the bases. He does steal almost 20 bases a season. His defense is not very good, but who cares when you hit as well as he does? Not a lot of power. But yeah, he just gets base hits. He gets it done at the plate, and so that's why I had to find a spot for him because he's been such a good player the last 3 seasons. So I got him at number 10 on my list.
And he had one of the most memorable moments of this 2021 season. Let's relive that fact that he hit the walk-off home run in the Field of Dreams game that I'm sure James and Jack loved watching. Big Yankee fans over there, not me.
I was actually I'm okay with that because that's what propelled the 13-game win streak after that. So
Oh,
15
yeah, I was in Chicago for that game, and I got the last laugh the next day, so it was fine.
All right, and then sort of our Frank Schwindel of the day, and that a guy that probably isn't on the top 10 just yet, but could all of a sudden propel himself with a good season. That is, of course, Willy Adames, however you want to pronounce it. Good season with Milwaukee once he was traded from Tampa Bay. One of those weird examples where I guess Tampa traded away a piece that they no longer needed because obviously Wander Franco came up, and obviously they made the right decision because Franco's on our top 10 list and Willy Adames isn't, but a good season overall, 285, OPS plus of 135 when he was traded to the Milwaukee Brewers. Always has been known as a defensive first player, but really swung it well offensively. Any chance he repeats this, or was this just sort of a nice story going to go back to his old form in 2022?
I wouldn't say he fully regresses because it seems like he has found a home in Milwaukee, and he did put up great numbers there. And like he did talk about the frustrations he had hitting in the trop and like how that really affected him. So it seems like he has improved, and like he seems like he's a much better hitter now. I don't think I'm ready to put him in the top 10 because of that, but I definitely think that he's not going to go back and regress, being a 70 WRC plus guy. I think he'll stay as like, the 135 he had. And even back in Tampa, he has had numerous very solid offensive seasons. So I think he stays at like the 15 to 10 range for now with a chance to crack the top 10 next year.
And then are there any players out of this list that we haven't mentioned yet that you think deserve a shout out? Just in general, we're wrapping up pretty shortly because Jack has to get back to his class.
We skipped Trevor Story.
Tell me about Trevor Story quickly. Overall solid player.
Free agent. If your team signs him to play center field, don't be happy about it.
Yeah, James, you had him at 9. Yeah.
Yeah, I have him on my list. I mean, he's been a really around 300 hitter 2018, 2019, 2020. He's got a lot of pop in his bat. Everyone knows that. He hit 37 home runs in 2018. He hit 35 home runs in 2019. He can also steal a lot of bases. He stole 27 bags and 23 bags in those years, respectively. He's pretty good defensively. So that's obviously a plus. And he's had OPS plus over 120 the last 3 seasons besides 2021. So I think he's a really good player, and I think he could really thrive in a new home outside of Colorado. The only downside to the story is he loves to swing and miss and strike out all the time. He had 174 strikeouts, 191 strikeouts, 168 strikeouts, which obviously isn't good if you're a team like the Yankees who strikes out a lot already. But yeah, I think he's a great offensive player, and he's really solid defensively as well, and can make some plays on the base path. So good overall shortstop, and that's why he landed at number 9 on my list.
Oh, one thing I'll mention with him is he definitely had a much better second half than his first half. Overall, he had over an 800 OPS, 111 WRC plus. So definitely a very solid offensive season for the second half, where it seems like in the first half he really regressed and did not have a season like he was accustomed to. So I definitely think he is firmly the number 2 behind Carlos Correa in terms of available shortstops at the moment on the market. So we'll see where it goes from there. But I do have to say that Story, he is definitely a great player. I think teams are going to, it seems like if you go back to our interview with Ken Davidoff, he's going to get, low years, high AAV contract. We'll see what that means if a team's willing to bet that he does find that 2018, 2019 form. But I guess we'll see for now. But I do say that Story, I would expect him to have, a bounce back from 2021 rather.
And you'll get more Trevor Story, Carlos Correa content when they sign later in the offseason. Shout outs to guys like Dansby Swanson, Gio Urshela, Ahmed Rosario, JP Crawford, who are solid players, but just not top 10 at an especially loaded position like this. Unless there's anything else you guys have to add, Jack has to run off to class in 2 minutes. So have fun at that. And you can find us on Twitter at SideRetiredPod. The YouTube is SideRetiredPod. The website is SideRetiredPod.com. Wow, that's repetitive, but we'll go with it. James, Jack, unless there's anything else. No, we're all good. And I guess with that, the side is retired.